Hi guys, how are you doing? Bar Wild here. I wanted to discuss something with you guys. This is my first time building an actual PC, like a serious one. I've been working at a computer shop for quite some time now, and I got requested to build something a bit more serious this time. This one has a GTX1060, MSI Gaming X, paired up with an Intel CPU. I think it was an i7-7700 on a B250M Asus motherboard. So all in all, I really enjoyed this build to begin with and all the way through the end. It was kind of my first time in actual build. It was more serious with a more serious cooler. I mean, it's not like liquid cooling or something, but it was like a decent, I'd say it's a decent air cooler, which was a bit harder for me than most air coolers. This one was actually kind of annoying as well. The other co-workers also agreed with me on this one. It was one of my first cases built. One of my first builds to begin with, so I was kind of skeptical about how well would I perform, and I just hoped for the best. So I'm gonna walk you through what happened. I installed obviously the RAM. That's 2x8 at 8x2 Corsair Vengeance LPX 2400 DDR4. Yeah, usual stuff. It's nothing too fancy, but it's more than the average consumer would buy here in Israel. So I agree with it. I was happy with it. I was content with the way the build was gonna go. So, kicking it off, everything went kind of smoothly. Installed the CPU, installed the RAM, obviously, and then the air cooler was kind of a tricky one. It was kind of a problematic one because it was my first time installing this specific kind, and so I struggled with both the bracket, which was the easier part out of the two, and then installing the cooler itself onto the bracket, which was kind of the bigger issue for me. Because once I figured out how it was supposed to be done, it was kind of easier. It was just physically harder than it should have been, mainly because of just, I guess, a small form factor motherboard. It was an M version in comparison with a relatively large air cooler. Obviously not the biggest, but it's still a relatively large air cooler. Once I figured it out, that part was kind of easy. Finished with it in no time. Put the motherboard aside, and then it was time to get up with the case. That was a Sharkoon case. I think it was the VGW4 or the VG4W, something along those lines. Very nice case, very cheap too. I mean, the bonuses of a Sharkoon case that we in Israel kind of love at my computer shop. It's called KSP, which is a very famous Israeli computer brand. It's that these cases are very affordable. Like, this case costs about, give or take, $40. But in Israel, that's relative to about 160 shekels, which isn't that much. But the price you get, that you input, is worth the investment in terms of both build quality, which is decent. It's not the best, as you can see, but it's decent. And, for example, cable management, you get 2 fans, I think they're 120. And in general, it's a nice case to build in. It lacks a bit in the cable management department in the back, but I did enjoy this case to build with in general. So the obviously power supply was a modular one. It was an Antec. I think it was a 550 Edge version. It was gold, not a very bad one, obviously, which I also enjoyed using. It was my first modular PSU as well. It was my first big graphics card. I mean, both in size and in the fact that it's not a 1050 Ti or RX 560, which are very easy to install cards, not very problematic to begin with. And so I kind of struggled. I learned the ways of how to properly use and handle this equipment in terms of modular power supply, the different tower case cooling, and so on and so on. So all in all, it was a very positive experience. I enjoyed throughout learning how to properly use it, I guess. And I enjoyed building in the case. So now we're off to pretty much assembling all of the PSU cables. So I chose what I needed. Obviously, it's a modular one, so it's much easier. And then I preemptively inserted the CPU cable so it wouldn't interrupt later, because it's pretty annoying to handle. And I want the power to go through and have a decent cable management to begin with, even if the kid who ordered it wouldn't necessarily care about cable management. Because 1, better airflow, 2, better aesthetics, 3, it's always a good experience. When I build my own computer, my own personal computer, I want to have the best cable management I can get from myself. So it's always good to learn and adapt and grow and so on and so on. Obviously, installing the actual motherboard wasn't very hard. Just had to relocate the thingies. I don't know how to call them in English. The stuff that you give the motherboard a bit of height, so it's not stuck directly onto the case to, you know, obviously not have the magnetic issues and so on. Also, that cup was very problematic. Should have probably put it aside at some point. You'll maybe see later on. Installing the GTX1060 MSI Gaming X, which was very nice to hold, bigger than I thought it would be. So also enjoyed, I guess, having, I'd say, a real graphics card in quotation marks, because it's a decent one. It's a decent entry-level, mid-level graphics card. Mine is an R9 Fury that I will later on replace to a 1080 or a 1080 Ti, depending on which one I prefer buying. Personally, I like both AMD and NVIDIA. Kind of prefer AMD over Intel when it comes to processors, because they're just better value for money. I have the Ryzen 7 1700, love it so much. It's overclocked to 3.7 on the stock cooler. There you see the problem with the cup that I had. I decided to keep this video raw. The only thing that I haven't put there, I just shorted it a bit, obviously made it fast-paced so it wouldn't be such of a horrible time-lapse to view, and then also obviously commented throughout, so it's less of a eyesore or an eye pain to view it without anyone commenting on the backside. Installing the GPU was obviously the easier part. Next up came up with cable management, installing the SATA drives, and so on and so on. Again, not a very big deal. This was a simple case to begin with. It shouldn't have been as hard as it was for me. I struggled a lot with both the air cooling and kind of learning this, and I wouldn't call it steep, but the learning curve of properly using your modular power supply. Plus, the one thing I hate the most about Sharkoon cases is the fact that no matter which case you get, there's always a Molex output out there. And, god damn it. They're not bad, they're just really annoying and big and clumsy to work with. Obviously, I'd rather have no Molexes at all, but hey, I guess if you have to, you have to. Which also made the whole point of a modular power supply kind of useless, because I was using both SATA cables for obviously my SSD and hard drive, which was a Western Digital Blue, 1 terabyte, and then also the Molex for the fans, and then obviously the PCI Express for the GPU and the CPU. So I used pretty much all of the cables that came with the PSU as a modular power supply. So the only real big plus that it gave me, aside from being modular per se, is that the cables weren't all clumped together from the entrance, as in it wasn't just like a big mess of a cable hole. Like, it was easier to handle in that way, but aside from that, it was just as annoying as a normal power supply. Obviously, cable management hasn't been the best here, but I slowly grew onto it, did it my way, did it a better way, obviously tended to improve on it for both my sake and the sake of the person who receives this PC, because I know that they're not going to view the cables that much. It's not going to be a big issue, but I decided, hey, might as well put something into it because I want to practice. This is good practice, especially with a modular power supply. And later on, I'll have more serious builds, so I know how to come at it, how to attack this per se, and have a better, straightforward approach towards it. Overall, again, cable management wasn't as big of a hassle as it could have been, but it was something that the Molexes made a bit worse. After we finished with this build, obviously we had to install Windows on it because the client wanted us to. So we did that. We checked that everything was okay, installed NVIDIA drivers, run some tests. PC was A-OK, and we sent it, and the customer went over to pick it up. That's just me doing some cable management. My friend over looking at me, checking how I do, and looking at the cable management, saying that there's no way in hell I'll be able to close this case once I'm done with the cable management because of how clumsy it is, despite having it look really good. I challenged myself. You can see how the cable management is pretty okay considering the situation. Told him, I got this. He's like, you can see why it's not working. He's letting me know why, and so on and so on. I'm like, dude, trust. At the end of the day, we got it, and once we did, he had to check another SSD, making sure that SSD worked. So while we did that, the SSD worked, and we were pretty much done with the case. and the design of it. Had to finish up once you tested the SSD. With the rest, loaded up the Windows, finished up everything that I had to finish, closed it up. Awesome glamour shots with my phone, and that's the case. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you learned something new, if you haven't, if you wanted to watch it, make fun of me, review, comment, whatever, like, subscribe. Hope you enjoyed it, and we have another video coming up of a more serious build that I will hope you enjoy.